Sandra Wilson's trembling hands clutched the rejection letter from Airline's CEO. After 30 years building the company, she'd lost everything because of one flight attendant's racist treatment. But as the phone rang, she smiled. Her revenge plan was only beginning. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you're ready to see how justice unfolds when discrimination meets its match. Trust me, you won't believe how this powerful couple turns the tables on corporate America. Jackson and Sandra Wilson settled into their first-class seats aboard Airline Flight 2387 from Miami to Atlanta. At 73 and 71 respectively, the couple had earned their comfort after decades of building Wiltech Industries into a technology empire. They wore casual clothes, Jackson in khaki slacks and a navy polo, Sandra in a simple floral dress. Having just spent a week with their grandchildren in Miami. Water would be lovely before takeoff, Sandra told her husband, reaching for her medication in her purse. The doctor said I need to stay hydrated with these new pills. Flight attendant Tiffany Blackwell glided through the first-class cabin, offering champagne and hot towels. Her smile gleamed as she served the white passengers in rows 1 and 2. "Anything I can get for you, Mr. Patterson?" she asked a middle-aged white executive. "Your usual scotch on the rocks." "You know me too well, Tiffany," he laughed, accepting the drink with a wink. When Tiffany reached row 3 where the Wilsons sat, her smile vanished. She breezed past without acknowledgement, moving to assist a young white couple across the aisle. "Excuse me," Sandra called politely. "Could I please have some water for my medication?" Tiffany's eyes flicked over Sandra momentarily before she responded, "I'll be with you shortly," and continued attending to other passengers. 10 minutes passed. The flight attendant made 3 more trips through the cabin, refilling drinks for white passengers while consistently overlooking the Wilsons. "My wife asked for water some time ago," Jackson finally said, his deep voice firm but controlled. "She needs to take her heart medication before takeoff." Tiffany's expression hardened. "Sir, I'm busy with pre-flight duties. You'll have to wait your turn like everyone else." The dismissive tone wasn't lost on Jackson, who had faced this kind of treatment his entire life, first as a boy in rural Georgia, then as a student at MIT, and even as a successful entrepreneur. He'd learned to pick his battles carefully. "I understand you're busy," he said evenly. "But my wife's medication is time-sensitive." "I said I'll get to it when I can," Tiffany snapped, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. 2 minutes later, a white businessman across the aisle raised his hand. "Could I get some water?" "Absolutely, sir." "Right away," Tiffany chirped, returning almost instantly with a bottle of Evian and a glass of ice. Sandra's chest tightened, not from her heart condition, but from the familiar sting of being treated as less than human. She'd built a corporate empire, mentored hundreds of young professionals, donated millions to charity, and yet in moments like these, none of that mattered. All Tiffany saw was her skin color. In row 5, Dr. Maya Patel, an Asian-American neurosurgeon, observed the interaction with growing discomfort. Discreetly, she pulled out her phone and began recording. "This isn't right," she whispered to herself, angling the camera to capture Tiffany's continued pattern of ignoring the elderly black couple while attentively serving white passengers. By the time the plane reached cruising altitude, Sandra's complexion had taken on an ashen quality. Her hands trembled slightly as she dry-swallowed her medication. "Are you all right, honey?" Jackson asked, genuine concern in his eyes. "Just a little lightheaded," Sandra admitted. "The doctor said these pills could cause dizziness without proper hydration." Jackson pressed the call button. It glowed for 8 minutes before Tiffany appeared with an exaggerated sigh. "Is there an emergency?" she asked coldly. "My wife still hasn't received water for her medication, and now she's feeling unwell," Jackson explained. "Sir, there's no need to exaggerate. I'll bring water during the regular beverage service." As Tiffany walked away, a white woman 2 rows ahead turned around. "That's horrible," she said, but made no move to intervene. Dr. Patel, however, stood up. "Excuse me," she called to Tiffany. "I'm a physician, and that woman needs water immediately for her medication. It's a medical necessity." Only with a doctor's intervention did Sandra finally receive her water, nearly 45 minutes after her initial request. By then, her delayed medication had caused her blood pressure to spike dangerously. When the plane landed in Atlanta, Sandra couldn't stand without assistance. Airport medical personnel waited at the gate, summoned by the captain after Dr. Patel insisted on medical attention. As paramedics helped Sandra into a wheelchair, Jackson looked back at Tiffany, who was cheerfully bidding farewell to other passengers. "This isn't over," he said quietly, not as a threat but as a simple statement of fact. The steady beep of hospital monitors punctuated the silence in Sandra's private room at Emory University Hospital. Jackson sat beside her bed, his normally commanding presence diminished by worry. "Mrs. Wilson," Dr. Harriet Johnson explained, "your condition was exacerbated by the delay in medication. For someone with your cardiovascular history, proper timing and hydration aren't optional. They're essential." Jackson's jaw tightened. And all because a flight attendant couldn't bring a cup of water. "I'm fine now," Sandra insisted, though the monitors told a different story. "It's nothing we haven't dealt with before. But this time was different." Outside in the waiting room, their son Anthony Wilson, a prominent civil rights attorney, was on his phone, watching the situation explode online. Dr. Maya Patel's video had gone viral. #AirEliteRacism was trending nationwide, with over 2 million views in just 6 hours. The footage clearly showed Tiffany's pattern of attentive service to white passengers while repeatedly ignoring the Wilsons' basic requests. Anthony entered the room, his expression grim. Air Elite just released a statement. He held up his tablet, displaying the company's response. Air Elite is aware of a video circulating regarding service on Flight 2387. We take all customer concerns seriously and are investigating the matter. Our company is committed to providing excellent service to all passengers regardless of background. The employee in question has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Not a single mention of racism or discrimination, Anthony noted. Just corporate doublespeak. Sandra adjusted herself in the hospital bed. It's always the same story. They'll give her a slap on the wrist, some perfunctory diversity training, and everything continues as before. A notification chimed on Jackson's phone. He frowned at the screen. "What is it?" Sandra asked. "Howard Chambers," Jackson replied, referring to their longtime investment banker. "Says he has urgent information about Air Elite. Apparently, they're in financial trouble, worse than the public knows. There's a confidential bidding process starting for potential buyers." Sandra's eyes met her husband's, a silent communication born from 50 years of marriage. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" she asked. "Perhaps this is an opportunity," Jackson said carefully. Anthony looked between his parents. "What kind of opportunity?" Sandra's mind drifted back to 1972, when she and Jackson had started with nothing but a small electronics repair shop in Atlanta. Both brilliant engineering graduates, she from Spelman, he from MIT. They'd been denied business loans from 17 banks before finding one willing to take a chance on black entrepreneurs. Over decades, they'd built Wiltec Industries into a technology and investment powerhouse, weathering discrimination at every step. They'd learned to fight injustice not just with protests and lawsuits, but with economic power. "We could sue them," Anthony suggested, the attorney in him already building the case. "The video evidence is compelling. We could win millions in damages." Sandra shook her head. "And what would that accomplish?" "They'd write a check, issue another empty apology, and nothing would change." "What are you suggesting, Mom?" Jackson answered for his wife. "We don't want their money. We want their company." Anthony's eyes widened. "You want to buy Air Elite? The whole airline? Why not?" Sandra sat up straighter, energy returning to her voice. Wiltech's aviation division already manufactures components for Boeing and Airbus. We understand the industry. And we have the capital, Jackson added. Howard estimates Air Elite's market value has dropped 30% in the past year. They're vulnerable. But they wouldn't sell to you, Anthony argued. Especially not after this incident goes public. It would look like they're admitting guilt. Sandra's lips curved into a slight smile. Who said they'd know it was us? Later that afternoon, Jackson participated in a video call with Air Elite CEO Thomas Reynolds and the board of directors. Sandra insisted on joining despite her doctor's recommendation for rest. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, Reynolds began, his corporate smile not reaching his eyes. On behalf of Air Elite, I want to personally apologize for your experience. The behavior you encountered doesn't reflect our values. And what values are those, Mr. Reynolds? Sandra asked pointedly. Reynolds cleared his throat. Respect, excellence, and customer satisfaction for all our passengers. Interesting, Sandra replied. Because based on your company's hiring practices, executive composition, and history of similar incidents, I'd say we experienced exactly your values. Reynolds's smile faltered. I assure you, this was an isolated incident. The employee has been disciplined. Disciplined how? Jackson pressed. That's a personnel matter, but I can assure you it's being handled appropriately. As the call concluded with promises of flight vouchers and loyalty points, the Wilsons exchanged knowing glances. The battle lines were drawn. Howard, Jackson said in a private call afterward, we need to create a shell company immediately. No connection to Wiltech or our family name. And we need to enter that bidding process for Air Elite, quietly. You're serious about this, Howard observed. Deadly serious, Sandra confirmed. It's time someone changed things from the inside. Phoenix Aviation Holdings emerged from nowhere 3 days later, a Delaware-registered corporation with impressive financial credentials but deliberately vague ownership. In reality, it was the Wilsons' creation, funded by their personal wealth rather than Wiltech Industries' resources to maintain separation and secrecy. The bidding process opens next week, Howard Chambers explained in the Wilsons' home office. Air Elite is trying to keep this quiet to prevent further stock devaluation, but several major players already know. Who else is bidding? Jackson asked, reviewing the preliminary paperwork. Harold Fitzgerald's group is the front-runner, Howard replied, referring to the notorious corporate raider. His strategy is predictable, slash jobs, cut routes, extract value, then sell off the pieces. Sandra frowned. 15,000 employees would lose their livelihoods. Fitzgerald doesn't care about people, Howard said. He cares about profit margins. The Wilsons needed inside information to make their bid competitive. Through their extensive network, they connected with Zara Johnson, a brilliant financial analyst who had left Air Elite 2 years earlier after being repeatedly passed over for promotion despite outperforming her white colleagues. I can tell you exactly what's happening inside Air Elite, Zara said during their confidential meeting. Their cash flow problems are worse than they're admitting to potential bidders. They've been hiding maintenance issues and their customer satisfaction metrics are plummeting. Would you be willing to help us? Sandra asked. We need someone who understands their financial structure. Zara's expression hardened. When I left Air Elite, my director told me I should be grateful they hired a black woman at all. I do this for free, but I'm assuming you're offering competitive compensation. Executive Vice President of Finance at Phoenix, with stock options, Jackson proposed. Assuming we succeed. Then I'm in, Zara said without hesitation. And I can do better than just consulting. I still have friends in their finance department. With the right approach, I could get temporarily reassigned back to help with the sale process. Within a week, Zara had secured a position as a contract financial analyst at Air Elite, ostensibly representing a neutral third party helping prepare the company's books for potential buyers. In reality, she became the Wilsons' eyes and ears inside the operation. Meanwhile, Sandra's health concerns escalated. The hospital incident had aggravated her existing heart condition, adding urgency to their mission. Against her doctor's advice, she insisted on being involved in every aspect of the acquisition plan. "This matters too much for me to sit on the sidelines," she told Jackson after a particularly difficult night. "Your health matters more," he countered. "We've built everything together. I need you beside me to enjoy the victory." "Then let's work faster," she insisted. Through Zara, they learned that Thomas Reynolds was privately courting Harold Fitzgerald, believing the corporate raider represented the quickest exit strategy. More disturbing were the private comments Reynolds had made about the viral incident. He told the executive team that this whole racism accusation was manufactured victimhood, Zara reported during a secure video call. He said, and I quote, "These people fly first class once and expect special treatment." "These people," Sandra repeated, her voice steely. After 50 years fighting this battle, it's still these people. More troubling information emerged about Tiffany Blackwell. Despite Air Elite's public statement about taking the incident seriously, she had received only a 2-day suspension with pay, essentially a long weekend, before returning to first-class cabin service. They promoted her to senior cabin crew for the Atlanta-Los Angeles route, Zara revealed. Some of the staff think it was to keep her quiet about other incidents. Other incidents? Jackson inquired. Apparently, this wasn't her first complaint. Just the first one that went viral. Through Howard's banking connections, Phoenix Aviation Holdings submitted its initial expression of interest. The bid was deliberately set in the middle range, substantial enough to be taken seriously but not so aggressive as to raise suspicion. Fitzgerald's opening bid, as expected, topped the list. His reputation for swift, ruthless action made him attractive to board members looking for a quick sale and clean exit. Reynolds is pushing hard for Fitzgerald, Zara reported after an executive briefing. He stands to receive a $8 million golden parachute if the sale closes by quarter's end. Anthony, who had taken leave from his law practice to assist his parents, developed the legal strategy. "We need to position Phoenix as the stability option," he advised. "Fitzgerald will gut the company. We'll preserve it." As the first round of bidding concluded, Phoenix Aviation Holdings secured a spot among the 5 finalists. The Wilsons' plan was proceeding perfectly, until Harold Fitzgerald began asking questions. "Someone's investigating Phoenix's corporate structure," Howard warned during an emergency call. "They're digging into the shell companies, trying to identify the actual owners." Fitzgerald? Jackson guessed. "Most likely. He doesn't like competition." 2 days later, their fears were confirmed when Phoenix received a pointed inquiry from Air Elite's board demanding complete transparency regarding ownership and long-term intentions. The message was clear: someone suspected their true identities. "If they discover it's us, they'll reject our bid immediately," Sandra worried. "They'd rather go bankrupt than sell to the black couple they discriminated against." That night, as the Wilsons strategized their response, an unmarked envelope arrived at their home. Inside was a single photograph of their granddaughters playing in their Miami backyard, taken just days earlier, with no message attached. The threat was unmistakable. "They're watching our family," Jackson said grimly. "This goes beyond business." "We don't scare easily," Sandra reminded him. "We didn't in 1972, and we won't now." After ensuring their family's security with additional protection, the Wilsons prepared their response to the board's inquiry. Phoenix Aviation Holdings would reveal its management team, a diverse group of veteran airline executives recruited by the Wilsons, while maintaining the fiction that ownership consisted of a consortium of private investors. As they submitted their response, Zara called with alarming news. "Phoenix has been removed from the bidding list," she said, her voice urgent. Reynolds told the board there were irregularities in the application. "He's fast-tracking Fitzgerald's bid for approval." "Can they do that?" Anthony demanded. They're doing it, Zara confirmed. Final presentations are scheduled for next week, and Phoenix isn't on the schedule. As Sandra absorbed this setback, a sharp pain lanced through her chest. She gasped, clutching at the conference table. Sandra! Jackson cried, rushing to her side as she collapsed. For the second time in a month, Sandra Wilson was rushed to the hospital, her fight for justice taking a dangerous physical toll. Have you ever wondered what lengths powerful people will go to protect their privilege? What would you do if someone threatened your family just for seeking justice? The Wilsons are about to face their darkest hour in their battle against Air Elite, but the question is, will they back down or fight harder? 3 days after Phoenix Aviation Holdings was mysteriously dropped from consideration, Harold Fitzgerald strolled into Thomas Reynolds' office without an appointment. The corporate raider's reputation for ruthlessness was matched only by his arrogance. "I know who's behind Phoenix," Fitzgerald announced, dropping a folder on Reynolds' desk. Reynolds paged through the documents, his expression darkening. "The Wilsons? The same couple from the water incident?" "The very same," Fitzgerald confirmed with a predatory smile. "Quite the coincidence, wouldn't you say?" "This is a nightmare," Reynolds muttered. "If word gets out that we're selling to the same people we discriminated against, the PR damage would be catastrophic." "Which is why you'll ensure my bid succeeds," Fitzgerald replied. "I've taken the liberty of creating some insurance." The insurance materialized the next morning when national business publications ran stories questioning Wiltec Industries' financial stability. The articles cited anonymous sources familiar with the company, claiming the Wilsons were overleveraged and facing liquidity problems. Wiltec stock dropped 11% before the market even opened. "This is a coordinated attack," Anthony told his father as they monitored the fallout. "Fitzgerald's trying to destabilize our primary company to undermine our bid for Air Elite." Jackson nodded grimly. "And damage our reputation with Air Elite's board. If they think we're financially troubled, they'll never sell to us, even if we get back into the bidding." Sandra, against medical advice, had checked herself out of the hospital and was working from their home office. Her determination had only strengthened after the latest health scare. "We need to understand exactly what happened with our bid," she insisted. "Zara, can you access the board's communication about Phoenix?" Over a secure line, Zara sounded worried. "I'm trying, but they've restricted access to those files. Something's definitely suspicious." Reynolds has moved all bid discussions to his private email. "Keep digging," Sandra urged. "And be careful." The threats escalated beyond financial manipulation. Anthony discovered his law firm's clients were being approached by competitors offering unusually favorable terms to switch representation. His partners were asking uncomfortable questions about the sudden client exodus. "They're attacking us from every angle," he told his parents. "Professional, financial, personal." The personal attacks were the most disturbing. After the photograph of their granddaughters, the Wilsons received more unmarked envelopes, each containing surveillance photos of family members with timestamps from the previous 24 hours. "We should go to the police," Jackson suggested. "With what evidence?" Sandra countered. "Unmarked photos with no explicit threats. We'd be dismissed immediately. And even if they took it seriously, an investigation would expose our connection to Phoenix, which would kill our bid." Meanwhile, Zara continued her covert investigation inside Air Elite. What she discovered was more troubling than they had imagined. "The discrimination issues go far beyond one flight attendant," she reported. "I found documented patterns in hiring, promotion, and passenger complaints. When incidents involve white passengers, they're escalated and resolved immediately. When they involve passengers of color, they're categorized as subjective perception issues and often closed without action." "Can you get copies of those records?" Anthony asked. "Already done," Zara confirmed. "But there's more. Tiffany Blackwell wasn't disciplined, she was rewarded. Reynolds personally approved her promotion to senior cabin crew 3 days after the incident with your parents. As this information leaked to certain journalists, public pressure on Air Elite intensified. A major national newspaper launched an investigation into the company's practices, interviewing former employees who confirmed systematic discrimination. Air Elite stock plummeted 23% in a single day. Reynolds called an emergency board meeting to accelerate the sale process. "We need to finalize this deal immediately," he insisted. "Fitzgerald's offer is our best option for shareholder value." Board member James Chen, the only person of color in the leadership team, raised concerns. "Shouldn't we re-examine all qualified bids, including Phoenix? Their financials were solid." "Phoenix was disqualified for legitimate reasons," Reynolds snapped. "The matter is closed." That evening, Chen received a file from an anonymous email account containing evidence that Reynolds had ordered Phoenix's disqualification immediately after learning of its connection to the Wilsons, with no legitimate business justification. As the Wilsons strategized their next move, Sandra experienced another cardiac episode. This one was more severe, requiring emergency intervention and resulting in her doctor's ultimatum: withdraw from stressful activities or risk permanent damage. In her hospital room, Sandra faced the possibility of defeat. "Maybe we should walk away," she whispered to Jackson. "Focus on making sure Air Elite pays legally for their discrimination." Jackson took her hand. "Is that really what you want? After everything we've built and fought for?" Before she could answer, Anthony burst into the room. "Something's happening at Air Elite. Reynolds just announced Tiffany Blackwell is being promoted to Customer Experience Manager. They're positioning it as part of their commitment to staff development." Sandra's monitors showed her heart rate increasing. "They're not even pretending anymore," she said. "They're flaunting their impunity." "It's a deliberate message," Jackson agreed. "They're telling everyone that discrimination has no consequences." Sandra's expression hardened with resolve. "Get me out of this hospital. We're not backing down." "Do you think the Wilsons should risk everything to continue their fight, or protect their health and family by walking away?" Comment number 1 if you believe justice is worth any price, or number 2 if you think personal safety should come first. Like and subscribe to see how these brave entrepreneurs respond to corporate intimidation. Will they find allies in unexpected places, or has the powerful airline industry closed ranks against them? At 2 o'clock in the morning, James Chen parked 6 blocks from the Wilsons' home and walked the remaining distance, constantly checking to ensure he wasn't followed. As Air Elite's only Asian American board member, his career and reputation were on the line. The Wilson security team intercepted him at the perimeter of their property. "I need to speak with them," Chen insisted. "It's about Air Elite." In the Wilsons' living room, Chen declined coffee, too anxious to consume caffeine. "I've been with Air Elite for 12 years, he began. "I'm the only non-white board member, and trust me, it's not for lack of qualified candidates." "Why are you here, Mr. Chen?" Jackson asked directly. "Because what happened to your wife happens every day at our company, to passengers and employees. I've tried to change things from within, but I'm consistently outvoted or ignored." Chen placed a flash drive on the coffee table. "This contains board minutes, emails, and internal reports documenting systematic discrimination at Air Elite. Including Reynolds' explicit instruction to disqualify Phoenix Aviation after learning of your involvement. Why would you risk your position to help us?" Sandra questioned. Chen's professional composure cracked. 3 years ago, my mother was flying first class to visit me. She's 86 and doesn't speak much English. A flight attendant, Tiffany Blackwell, actually refused to help her with her luggage or meal, mocked her accent, and told another crew member, these people should fly airlines from their own country. His hands trembled slightly. "I filed a formal complaint. Reynolds personally assured me it would be addressed. 6 months later, I discovered the complaint had been marked resolved with no action taken. When I confronted Reynolds, he suggested I was too emotionally invested and should recuse myself from personnel matters. "So this is personal for you," Anthony observed. "It's personal for anyone who's ever been made to feel less than human because of how they look," Chen replied. "My position gives me privilege many don't have. If I don't use it to create change, what's the point?" The Wilsons spent hours reviewing Chen's documents, which provided a devastating picture of Air Elite's culture. "This is enough to support multiple class action lawsuits," Anthony noted. "But a legal approach would take years, and the company might not survive the process. Which is why acquisition remains our best strategy," Sandra concluded. "We need to get back into the bidding process, legitimately this time." Chen agreed to work as their inside advocate, despite the personal risk. Several board members are uncomfortable with Fitzgerald's aggressive approach. If we present a compelling alternative, they might reconsider. The next day brought another unexpected ally. Dr. Maya Patel, whose video had exposed Tiffany's discriminatory behavior, contacted the Wilsons through their attorney. "I've been following what's happening with Air Elite," she explained during their meeting. "The company's response was insulting. I've collected testimonials from 23 other passengers who witnessed discriminatory treatment on Air Elite flights but had no recourse." Dr. Patel's network of medical professionals, many from minority backgrounds, had experienced similar treatment when flying for conferences and medical emergencies. "We're prepared to share our experiences publicly and boycott the airline if necessary." With Chen working from inside and growing public support, the Wilsons formulated a two-pronged strategy: pressure the board to reconsider Phoenix's bid while building a coalition of minority employees within Air Elite. Zara's position gave her access to employee records. "I've identified key personnel in various departments who filed discrimination complaints or been passed over for promotion despite excellent performance reviews," she reported. Discreetly, the Wilsons reached out to these employees, finding many eager to support change from within. They formed a shadow organization called Air Elite for All, sharing information and documenting ongoing issues. Meanwhile, Reynolds discovered Chen's advocacy for reopening the bidding process. During a heated executive session, Reynolds moved to remove Chen from the board for violation of confidentiality agreements. "You can remove me," Chen stated calmly, "but I've already shared my concerns with major shareholders. They're asking questions about why Phoenix was disqualified without proper evaluation." Reynolds' face reddened. "You're jeopardizing this entire deal. Fitzgerald is offering 20% above current market value. And planning to dismantle the company," Chen countered. "How does that serve our employees or long-term shareholders?" The confrontation ended in stalemate, but Reynolds immediately restricted Chen's access to sensitive information and scheduled a special shareholder meeting to vote on his removal. As pressure mounted, Fitzgerald made his final move, an offer that seemed impossible to reject. He increased his bid by an additional 15% and guaranteed executive retention packages. "He's buying the board's approval," Zara warned. "And it's working." The Wilsons faced a critical decision. To compete with Fitzgerald's offer, they would need to significantly increase their bid, which would require liquidating substantial personal assets. "It's a risk," Howard advised. "You'd be concentrating an enormous portion of your wealth in a troubled company with an entrenched culture of discrimination." "Sometimes change requires sacrifice," Sandra said, her mind made up. "We've spent our lives building businesses. Now we need to use that success to create meaningful change." The Wilsons liquidated their vacation properties, art collection, and personal investment portfolios. They were all in on acquiring Air Elite. Just as they prepared to submit their enhanced bid, Sandra received a call from an unlisted number. "Mrs. Wilson," said an unfamiliar voice. "My name is Dominic Harris. 20 years ago, I was Air Elite's vice president of operations until I raised concerns about discriminatory practices. I was forced out but received a substantial settlement that included a non-disclosure agreement." "Why are you breaking that agreement to call me?" Sandra asked. Because I've been watching what's happening, and I know you're trying to acquire Air Elite. I want to help. My NDA expires next month, and I'm prepared to provide financial backing and testify about the company's long-standing issues. Harris's involvement brought not only additional capital but invaluable institutional knowledge. As a former executive, he understood Air Elite's operations and culture intimately. With their strengthened position, the Wilsons prepared for their final push. Sandra, despite continuing health concerns, insisted on personally attending the final presentation to the board. This isn't just a business acquisition, she told her doctors. This is about standing up in the room where decisions are made and being seen. I've worked too hard and come too far to let others speak for me now. The night before the board meeting, Chen called with disturbing news. Reynolds is trying to block your entry to the building tomorrow. He's instructing security not to allow you past the lobby. Jackson smiled for the first time in weeks. Let him try. The Air Elite headquarters in downtown Atlanta projected power through architecture, a 40-story glass tower with the company's distinctive wing logo emblazoned near the top. In the marble-floored lobby, security personnel maintained a careful watch over who accessed the executive floors. At precisely 9 o'clock, Jackson and Sandra Wilson entered, accompanied by Anthony, Zara, and Dominic Harris. Sandra, despite her recent health challenges, walked with the dignified bearing that had commanded respect throughout her career. She wore a tailored royal blue suit, the same color as the Air Elite logo, a subtle psychological statement. At the security desk, they encountered the first obstacle. "I'm sorry," the guard said after checking his tablet. "I don't see your names on the approved visitor list for today." Jackson presented the official board meeting notification. "We're here for the 9:30 acquisition presentation. Phoenix Aviation Holdings." The guard made a call, speaking in hushed tones. Minutes later, Thomas Reynolds himself emerged from an elevator, his corporate smile strained. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson," he said with forced cordiality. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. Today's meeting is for qualified bidders only." "Phoenix Aviation Holdings is a qualified bidder," Jackson stated firmly. "Your own board reinstated us yesterday." Reynolds' smile faltered. "I wasn't informed of any board action." "Perhaps you should check with your directors," Sandra suggested. "Particularly Mr. Chen." As if on cue, James Chen appeared from another elevator. "Thomas, the board voted electronically last evening. Phoenix was reinstated by a margin of 6-5. He handed Reynolds a tablet displaying the voting record. "Their presentation is scheduled for 9:30, as documented here." Reynolds' face hardened. "This is highly irregular." "I'll need to confirm, you'll need to comply with your board's directive," Chen interrupted politely but firmly. "Unless you wish to explain to our shareholders why you're obstructing a potential acquisition that could increase their stock value." Trapped by corporate protocol, Reynolds had no choice but to escort them upstairs. In the elevator, an uncomfortable silence prevailed until Sandra spoke. "Mr. Reynolds, I believe one of your employees works on this floor." "Tiffany Blackwell. Recently promoted to Customer Experience Manager." Reynolds' jaw tightened. "Mrs. Blackwell is a valued team member with an exemplary record." "Exemplary," Sandra repeated thoughtfully. An interesting choice of words. As they exited the elevator, Tiffany Blackwell herself rounded the corner, stopping abruptly when she recognized the Wilsons. For a moment, genuine shock registered on her face before she composed herself. "Mrs. Blackwell," Sandra acknowledged with perfect civility. "Congratulations on your promotion." Tiffany's eyes darted between the Wilsons and Reynolds. "Thank you," she managed, clearly unsettled by their presence. "We found your service quite memorable," Sandra continued. "In fact, it inspired our interest in Air Elite." Before Tiffany could respond, Reynolds intervened. "Mrs. Blackwell has meetings to attend. We should proceed to the boardroom." In the expansive boardroom, 11 board members sat around a polished mahogany table. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to open hostility. Harold Fitzgerald occupied a seat near Reynolds' position, his presence unexpected at a competitor's presentation. Mr. Fitzgerald is here as my invited observer, Reynolds explained, noting the Wilson surprise. His bid remains the board's primary consideration. Of course, Jackson replied smoothly. We welcome the opportunity to address all stakeholders. Sandra began their presentation with quiet authority. Distinguished board members, we appear before you today representing Phoenix Aviation Holdings. But more importantly, we come as individuals who believe Air Elite can become the industry leader it was meant to be. She activated the presentation screen, displaying not financial projections but the viral video of Tiffany denying her water on the flight. This moment, Sandra continued as the silent footage played, represents more than one employee's failure or one passenger's discomfort. It represents a systemic issue that threatens your company's very existence. The board members shifted uncomfortably as the video concluded. Now let's examine the financial consequences. Jackson transitioned, displaying charts showing Air Elite's declining customer satisfaction metrics, increasing discrimination complaints, and plummeting stock value. In the past 5 years, Air Elite has lost 28% market share in key demographics. Your costs for legal settlements related to discrimination claims have increased 312%. Meanwhile, your competitors who have embraced inclusive practices have seen growth in these same areas. Anthony presented their comprehensive transformation plan, not just financial restructuring, but a complete cultural reinvention focused on equity and accountability at every level. Phoenix Aviation Holdings proposes not merely to acquire Air Elite, but to reimagine it, Sandra explained. Our bid includes provisions for executive retention based on measurable improvements in diversity metrics and customer satisfaction across all demographics. As they outlined their financial offer, competitive but still below Fitzgerald's inflated bid, Reynolds interrupted. This is all very admirable, he said dismissively, but the fact remains that Mr. Fitzgerald's offer represents significantly greater immediate value for our shareholders. Fitzgerald leaned forward with predatory confidence. My bid is 23% higher than Phoenix's. That's the bottom line. Everything else is just social justice window dressing. Is it window dressing to address the root cause of your company's decline? Sandra challenged. Mr. Fitzgerald offers a higher immediate payout because his strategy is to dismantle Air Elite for parts. We offer sustainable growth and restoration of your brand's value. Mrs. Wilson, Reynolds said, his tone condescending, with all due respect, I think you're allowing personal feelings about an unfortunate isolated incident to color your business judgment. Isolated incident? Sandra repeated. She nodded to Zara, who distributed folders to each board member. These documents detail 278 similar, isolated incidents reported within Air Elite over the past 3 years. 84% were closed with no action taken. The board members paged through the evidence with growing discomfort. This is confidential company information, Reynolds protested. How did you obtain these records? The better question, Jackson countered, is why you concealed these patterns from your own board. Reynolds' face flushed. This is ridiculous. One passenger claims discrimination and suddenly it's a conspiracy. These so-called patterns are nothing but subjective perceptions from people looking for special treatment or compensation. The room fell silent at his unguarded comment. People? Sandra inquired softly. Which people would those be, Mr. Reynolds? Realizing his misstep, Reynolds attempted to recover. All people. Any people. This isn't about race. Then let's discuss what it is about, Chen interjected, activating his tablet. With the board's permission, I'd like to enter something into our official record. On the main screen appeared emails from Reynolds' corporate account, including one regarding the viral incident, keep this Wilson situation contained. These people fly first class once and think they own the airline. Standard procedure, minimum acknowledgement, no admission of fault. Another email, regarding Tiffany's promotion, expedite Blackwell's advancement. She understands our passenger priorities and maintains appropriate service standards. Reynolds exploded from his chair. Those are private communications taken out of context. This is corporate espionage. This is governance, Chen corrected. As board members, we have fiduciary responsibility to understand management decisions that impact company performance. The boardroom erupted into chaos, with members arguing among themselves about the implications. Fitzgerald attempted to redirect the conversation to his bid, while Reynolds demanded Chen's immediate removal. Amidst the turmoil, Sandra rose, commanding attention without raising her voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "today you face a simple choice. You can accept Mr. Fitzgerald's higher bid, allowing him to dismantle a 70-year-old company while avoiding the hard work of addressing its fundamental problems. Or you can partner with Phoenix to transform Air Elite into the company it claims to be in its marketing materials, one that truly values every customer and employee." She looked each board member in the eye. "The choice you make today will define not just Air Elite's future, but your legacy as corporate leaders in an increasingly diverse America." As the presentation concluded, board members filed out for deliberation, their expressions unreadable. Only Chen offered an encouraging nod as he passed. In the waiting area, Jackson squeezed Sandra's hand. "Whatever happens, you were magnificent in there." "We did everything we could," she agreed. "Now it's in their hands." 3 hours of deliberation stretched into 4, then 5. Outside the boardroom, the Wilsons waited with growing anxiety. "This isn't normal," Zara whispered. "Board votes on acquisition offers typically take 90 minutes at most." Finally, at 4:17 in the afternoon, the boardroom doors opened. James Chen emerged first, his expression grim. "They accepted Fitzgerald's bid," he said quietly. 6-5. Sandra's heart sank. "After everything we presented?" "The final argument came down to fiduciary duty," Chen explained. Reynolds convinced the majority that rejecting a 23% higher offer would expose them to shareholder lawsuits, regardless of the long-term strategic benefits of your proposal. "So discrimination continues to be profitable," Anthony said bitterly. Chen looked over his shoulder to ensure they weren't overheard. Reynolds pushed unusually hard. "There's something else happening here that I can't quite figure out." As they gathered their materials to leave, Reynolds approached with Fitzgerald at his side, both men failing to conceal their satisfaction. "Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Wilson," Reynolds said, "the board appreciates your interest in Air Elite. While they've chosen to proceed with Mr. Fitzgerald's offer, we wish you all the best in your future endeavors." "This isn't over," Sandra replied quietly. "Actually, it is," Fitzgerald interjected. "The agreement includes expedited closing and non-interference clauses. The transaction will be complete within 30 days. That evening, Reynolds and Fitzgerald celebrated at the exclusive Peachtree Club, occupying a private dining room with panoramic views of the Atlanta skyline. Unknown to them, one of the servers was the cousin of an Air Elite flight attendant who had experienced discrimination at the company. She recognized Reynolds and discreetly recorded their conversation. "To victory," Fitzgerald toasted, clinking his crystal glass against Reynolds. "And to your future role as Chief Strategy Officer at Fitzgerald Holdings, at twice your current compensation." Reynolds smiled broadly. "It's been a pleasure doing business with you, Harold. The board never needs to know about our prior arrangement." "Of course not," Fitzgerald agreed. "As far as they're concerned, my interest in Air Elite began with the public bidding process, not our golf game 6 months ago." "And what about these discrimination issues?" Reynolds asked. "The last thing we need is more viral videos causing stock volatility during the transition." Fitzgerald waved dismissively. "We'll create a diversity task force that produces nothing but press releases. Meanwhile, we'll quietly settle the most visible complaints and bury the rest in mandatory arbitration. Standard procedure." At the Wilson residence, the mood was somber. Sandra's health had deteriorated with the stress, and her doctor had insisted on home nursing care. "We gave it our best," Jackson consoled her. "Maybe it's time to focus on your recovery." Sandra stared out the window, uncharacteristically defeated. "All my life, I've believed that excellence and integrity would eventually overcome prejudice. That if we built something valuable enough, did something important enough, we'd finally be seen as equals." She turned to her husband, eyes glistening. "Was I wrong all along?" Before Jackson could answer, Zara called with alarming news. "I've been locked out of the Airline financial system," she reported. "And I've heard from 3 employees that Reynolds is accelerating the closing timeline with Fitzgerald. They're trying to complete the deal in 10 days instead of 30. "That's practically impossible," Anthony objected. "The regulatory review alone takes weeks." "Unless they've been preparing this for months," Zara suggested. "Which would explain why Reynolds fought so hard against our bid." The next morning brought another blow. James Chen had been terminated and escorted from the building by security, allegedly for sharing confidential information with outside parties. "They're eliminating anyone who supported us," Jackson realized. "Consolidating control before the sale closes." While legal options seemed exhausted, Dr. Maya Patel hadn't given up. Her network of medical professionals had expanded their boycott of Airline, and she had organized a social media campaign highlighting the company's failure to address discrimination. "We've got #BoycottAirline trending nationally," she informed the Wilsons. Their advance bookings have dropped 22% in 4 days. Meanwhile, Anthony pursued every possible legal angle to challenge the sale. "There are irregularities in the bidding process, but proving Reynolds violated his fiduciary duty would require evidence of self-dealing or conflict of interest. Which we don't have," Jackson concluded. Yet, Anthony corrected. The server who had recorded Reynolds and Fitzgerald at the Peachtree Club contacted Dr. Patel through the growing network of Airline employees concerned about the company's future under Fitzgerald. The recording made its way to Anthony, providing the first concrete evidence of collusion. "This is the smoking gun," Anthony confirmed after consultation with his legal team. Reynolds and Fitzgerald had a pre-existing arrangement before the bidding process began. Reynolds was promised a lucrative position in Fitzgerald's organization in exchange for facilitating the sale. That's textbook self-dealing, Jackson realized. Reynolds put his personal gain above the company's interests. Exactly. This invalidates the board's decision because they voted without knowledge of Reynolds' conflict of interest. With renewed determination, they prepared a legal challenge to halt the sale. However, they faced a race against time as Reynolds and Fitzgerald rushed to close the transaction. Inside Airline, Tiffany Blackwell had been tasked with managing the employee response to the sale announcement. She held mandatory staff meetings emphasizing the exciting opportunities under new ownership, while identifying employees who expressed concerns. Unknown to her, many of these meetings were being recorded by members of the growing Airline for All movement. One recording captured Tiffany instructing managers to flag problematic diversity advocates for post-acquisition evaluation, corporate code for planned termination. Later that evening, security cameras recorded Tiffany entering the Human Resources Department after hours, accessing files related to discrimination complaints, and removing documents. What she didn't realize was that digital copies of everything she removed had already been secured by concerned employees and forwarded to the Wilsons' legal team. The evidence against Airline's leadership was mounting, but time was running out. Fitzgerald had scheduled the final closing meeting for Friday. Just 3 days away. With Sandra's health preventing her active involvement, Jackson took the lead, working around the clock with Anthony and their expanded legal team to prepare their case. They needed not just to block the sale to Fitzgerald but to position Phoenix as the alternative. On Thursday afternoon, a courier delivered a manila envelope to the Wilsons' home. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A printout of a bank transfer from a Cayman Islands account linked to Fitzgerald into Reynolds' personal offshore account. The transfer had occurred 6 months earlier, long before the public bidding process began. The amount, $2 million, described as a consulting retainer. Attached was a simple note: "Not everyone at Airline supports corruption. Good luck tomorrow." "This is it," Anthony said, examining the document. "With this and the recording, we have enough to stop the sale." But who sent it? Jackson wondered. Someone inside Reynolds' inner circle, Zara speculated. Only a handful of people would have access to his personal financial information. That night, as they finalized their strategy, Sandra insisted on reviewing every detail despite her doctor's orders to rest. "If we're going to do this," she said with determination, "we're going to do it right." As dawn broke on Friday, the Wilsons prepared for their final confrontation with Airlight's leadership. The court filing was ready, seeking an emergency injunction against the sale based on Reynolds' undisclosed conflict of interest. But before they could file, Dominic Harris called with shocking news. "Federal investigators just entered Airline headquarters," he reported. "The FBI is seizing documents and computers from Reynolds' office and the financial department." "What?" Jackson was stunned. "Who triggered the investigation?" "Anonymous whistleblower complaints citing securities fraud and corporate self-dealing," Harris replied. "Sound familiar?" For the first time in weeks, Sandra smiled. "It seems we have more allies than we realized." The unexpected federal raid threw Airline into chaos. FBI agents systematically collected evidence from executive offices while bewildered employees watched through glass walls. Thomas Reynolds, red-faced and shouting, was escorted to a conference room for questioning. "What exactly are the charges?" Jackson asked Dominic Harris, who maintained contacts within the company. "The warrant mentioned securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy," Harris reported. "Apparently, someone provided authorities with extensive documentation of Reynolds' secret arrangement with Fitzgerald, including offshore payments." Anthony's legal team immediately filed their emergency injunction to halt the sale, citing the ongoing federal investigation. Within hours, a judge granted the order, temporarily freezing all acquisition proceedings. Reynolds was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, creating a leadership vacuum at the critical moment. The board appointed CFO Patricia Alvarez as interim CEO, a career finance executive with no loyalty to Reynolds or his inner circle. "This is our opening," Zara advised. "Alvarez is a numbers person with a reputation for absolute integrity. She'll want to stabilize the company and protect its value." Jackson arranged an urgent meeting with Alvarez and key board members, while Sandra, despite her doctor's protests, insisted on joining by secure video link. Airline faces an existential crisis, Jackson began once they were assembled. The federal investigation will likely expand to include board members who approve decisions without proper disclosure. Meanwhile, your stock price has fallen 47% in 10 days. Board members exchanged nervous glances as he continued. Phoenix Aviation Holdings wishes to submit a revised acquisition proposal under these new circumstances. We believe it represents your best path forward. Why would we consider your offer now? Asked board member William Bradshaw. This chaos doesn't change the fact that Fitzgerald's bid was substantially higher. Fitzgerald's bid is irrelevant, Anthony interjected. He's been implicated in the investigation as well. His offer is dead, legally and practically. Interim CEO Alvarez studied the financial documents before her. Your original offer is no longer viable either. The company's value has deteriorated significantly in the past week. We understand, Sandra said from the video screen. That's why we've prepared a new proposal that reflects current realities while providing a path to recovery. The revised offer was indeed lower, reflecting Airlight's diminished position, but included provisions to protect existing jobs and routes, critical concerns for the board given the negative publicity surrounding the company. Why would you still want to acquire Airline after everything that's happened? Alvarez asked directly. The brand is damaged, morale is at rock bottom, and you'll inherit potential legal liabilities from the previous management. Because underneath these problems is a company with valuable assets, talented employees, and untapped potential, Sandra replied. What Air Elite lacks is leadership that values every employee and customer equally. The discussion continued for hours, with board members raising concerns and the Wilsons team addressing each one methodically. By evening, a tentative agreement had taken shape. Meanwhile, Harold Fitzgerald was fighting his own battle. News of his connection to Reynolds had sent his company's stock plummeting, and major investors were demanding answers. His legal team advised him to distance himself from Air Elite completely. Cut your losses, his chief counsel recommended. Any continued pursuit of this acquisition could expose you to criminal liability. Fitzgerald reluctantly agreed, formally withdrawing his bid with a public statement claiming changed market conditions had altered the acquisition's strategic value. Inside Air Elite, Tiffany Blackwell panicked as investigators began interviewing employees about discriminatory practices. Security cameras had captured her removing documents from human resources, and several employees had come forward with recordings of her directing them to manage discrimination complaints. In a desperate move, she contacted Reynolds, who was under house arrest pending formal charges. They're asking about the policies you approved, she said frantically. What should I say? Say nothing, Reynolds advised coldly. And if you're thinking of cutting a deal, remember our agreement covers mutual protection. If I go down, so do you. The threat backfired. Tiffany immediately contacted federal investigators, offering to provide evidence against Reynolds in exchange for leniency. By Monday morning, the Air Elite board faced two stark choices: accept the Wilsons' revised offer or navigate bankruptcy proceedings amid a federal investigation. Their decision would determine not just the company's fate but their own professional futures. As they prepared to vote, Dominic Harris made a surprising announcement. I've been authorized to inform you that a group of minority-owned investment firms has agreed to partner with Phoenix Aviation Holdings, increasing the cash component of our offer by 15%. The additional backing came from a coalition led by Dominic's extensive network of Black and minority executives who had faced similar discrimination throughout their careers. Together, they had pooled resources to support the Wilsons' vision of transforming Air Elite from within. This isn't just a business acquisition anymore, Harris explained to the board. It's become a movement for change across the industry. Sandra's health had stabilized enough for her to attend the final board meeting in person. As she entered the Air Elite boardroom with Jackson, employees lined the hallways, not in protest, but in silent support. Many wore small phoenix pins, symbols of the rebirth they hoped would come under new ownership. The board meeting began with Alvarez summarizing the company's precarious position. Our stock has fallen 62% in 2 weeks. Advance bookings are down 40%. We've received resignation letters from 34 senior managers. Without immediate intervention, Air Elite cannot meet its next payroll obligation. The vote, when it came, was not the narrow margin they had expected. After everything that had transpired, the board voted 8-3 to accept Phoenix Aviation Holdings' offer, with the stipulation that the Wilsons personally lead the transition team. As the meeting concluded, Sandra addressed the board one final time. Today marks not an ending but a beginning. We accept the responsibility you've entrusted to us, and we make this promise: the new Air Elite will value every employee and every passenger, not despite our differences but because of them. Our diversity will become our greatest strength. Outside the boardroom, employees had gathered, anxiously awaiting news. When Sandra and Jackson emerged, a spontaneous applause broke out, led by flight attendants, baggage handlers, and customer service representatives who had suffered under the previous regime. Sandra's vision, born from a moment of discrimination at 30,000 feet, was finally becoming reality. 1 year later, Sandra Wilson stood at the podium in Air Elite's renovated headquarters auditorium, addressing employees and media at the company's transformation anniversary. When we began this journey, many said it was impossible, she recalled. They said a 70-year-old company couldn't change its culture. They said prioritizing inclusivity would harm profitability. They said our vision was naive. She smiled, gesturing to the screen behind her displaying the company's financial results. Today, I'm proud to announce that the renamed Unity Airlines has achieved its third consecutive quarter of growth. Our customer satisfaction scores have increased 68%. Employee retention has improved by 43%. And most importantly, discrimination complaints have declined 92%. The journey hadn't been easy. The first months after the acquisition revealed deeper problems than even they had anticipated. Discriminatory practices were embedded in everything from route planning to vendor selection. Sandra and Jackson had made bold moves from day one. They dissolved the existing executive team and created a new leadership structure that reflected the diversity of their customers and workforce. James Chen returned as Chief Operating Officer, while Dr. Maya Patel was appointed to lead the newly created Passenger Advocacy Division. The Wilsons introduced comprehensive anti-discrimination policies with real accountability measures. Every employee, from baggage handlers to executives, underwent extensive training focused not just on avoiding discrimination but actively promoting inclusion. Most controversially, they established an independent oversight committee with the power to investigate complaints and recommend action regardless of an employee's position or tenure. The media had initially predicted failure. Industry analysts questioned whether passengers would embrace such dramatic changes. Competitors waited for the company to falter. Instead, Unity Airlines flourished. Customers responded positively to the authentic commitment to equal treatment. Employee morale soared as advancement opportunities opened based on merit rather than favoritism. The toxic culture that had defined Air Elite began to heal. Former CEO Thomas Reynolds eventually pleaded guilty to securities fraud and received a 5-year prison sentence. Harold Fitzgerald avoided criminal charges but faced civil penalties and lost control of his company to shareholders outraged by the scandal. As for Tiffany Blackwell, her fate took an unexpected turn. Rather than terminating her immediately, Sandra had offered a choice: leave the company or participate in a rigorous rehabilitation program designed to address unconscious bias and discriminatory behavior. To everyone's surprise, Tiffany chose the latter. "I didn't believe I was racist," she admitted during a difficult meeting with Sandra. "I thought I was just doing my job the way management expected. It took seeing everything unravel to realize how wrong I was." Tiffany's transformation wasn't immediate or without setbacks, but her progress became a powerful example of the change Sandra and Jackson hoped to inspire throughout the industry. Now, as Sandra concluded her anniversary address, she invited a special guest to join her on stage. Tiffany Blackwell, no longer in a flight attendant's uniform but wearing the business attire of her new role as diversity training coordinator, stepped forward nervously. "A year ago, I was part of the problem," Tiffany acknowledged to the assembled crowd. "Today, I'm committed to being part of the solution. I've learned that true service means serving everyone with equal dignity and respect." She turned to Sandra. "Mrs. Wilson, I want to publicly apologize for how I treated you and Mr. Wilson that day. There's no excuse for my behavior, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to make amends through my work." Sandra embraced Tiffany, a moment captured by dozens of cameras and soon shared across social media platforms with the hashtag #UnityWorks. Later that afternoon, Sandra and Jackson boarded a Unity Airlines flight to Miami to visit their grandchildren. As they settled into their first-class seats, a familiar face approached. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, Tiffany greeted them, now serving as a flight attendant for special training flights as part of her ongoing education. "Can I get you water before takeoff?" The simple question, once denied out of prejudice, represented the full circle of their journey. "Yes, thank you, Tiffany," Sandra replied with a warm smile. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Jackson took his wife's hand. "Did you ever imagine, when we were denied service a year ago, that we'd end up owning the airline?" Sandra laughed softly. "It wasn't about ownership. It was about accountability. About creating a world where our grandchildren won't have to fight the same battles we did." And yet, Jackson observed, sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't just speaking out, it's changing the system from within. As Unity Airlines Flight 1001 lifted into the clear blue sky, Sandra Wilson gazed out the window at the Atlanta skyline receding below. The company's new logo, a phoenix rising, gleamed on the wing, symbolizing the transformation of an industry once resistant to change. The next generation will face their own challenges, she mused. But hopefully, they'll do so in a world where more people understand that diversity isn't just a moral imperative, it's good business. The flight attendant approached with their drinks. "Anything else I can get for you, Mrs. Wilson?" "No, thank you," Sandra replied. "We have everything we need." This powerful story teaches us that confronting discrimination requires more than just speaking out, it demands strategic action and systemic change. The Wilsons understood that true transformation comes not from seeking compensation or public apologies, but by reimagining broken systems from the inside out. They recognized that economic power can be wielded as a force for social justice when guided by moral principles. Sandra and Jackson's journey demonstrates that discrimination persists not because of a few bad apples, but because of cultures that enable and reward prejudice. By acquiring the airline, they addressed the root cause rather than merely treating symptoms. Their approach also highlights the importance of building coalitions, from Dr. Patel's medical network to James Chen's insider advocacy to Dominic Harris's investor coalition. Perhaps most powerfully, the story reveals that redemption is possible even for those who participate in discriminatory systems. Tiffany's transformation reminds us that people can change when held accountable while being offered a path forward. The Wilsons' legacy wasn't just creating a more equitable company, it was establishing a blueprint for how historically marginalized groups can convert suffering into structural change that benefits everyone. What lessons from the Wilsons' strategy could you apply in your own life when facing injustice? Has discrimination ever motivated you to create positive change? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found it inspiring, subscribe for more powerful stories of justice and transformation, and share with someone who needs to hear this message today. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Together, we can turn difficult moments into opportunities for meaningful change.